Okay, cool. So welcome to the Emotions Masterclass. Welcome, Gerard. Thanks for showing up, being live, and for all of you who are watching the replay, welcome. I hope you got a chance to fill out your workbook because that's part of the work. That's identifying your emotions, identifying some of the blocks that got in the way. So to start out with, what I'd like us to do is um, create a sense of safety for our nervous systems. And we'll do that in a simple way. Some of you have probably done this with me before. And for those who haven't, all we're going to do is look around the room and take in everything slowly. So that is looking at the walls and the floor, looking behind you. If there's a window, looking at what's outside the window. If there's a mirror, looking what's inside the mirror. All your furniture, your art, just taking everything in, taking a couple of deep breaths, feeling your feet on the floor. And what this does is it's a signal to your nervous system that you have scanned the horizon and there are no tigers about to eat you. So it's a very simple one, but great tool, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed anytime. So we would typically use the chat box for this, but Gerard, would you be willing to tell me, first of all, where you're calling in from, what part of the world?
Sure, I'm in the Portland part of the world, the Portland, Oregon
Cool.
part of the world. I call it Prescott Village. It's called
Prescott Village.
Prescott.
Cool. And why is learning about and mastering emotions important to you?
Mm. So often I feel dominated by my emotions,
Hmm.
and um, and I want to be I want to experience my emotions without being dominated.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. So, as a reminder for those who don't know, my name is Adina Barlow and I'm a life coach. My mission is to help eliminate violence in our world, especially domestic violence. And that really starts here and here. It starts with how each of us think about ourselves and talk to ourselves, how we feel about ourselves and the relationship we have with our body, mind, and emotions. And so big change starts with small steps. And so every time you work on a little piece of yourself, creating more love and compassion and empathy and integration, you are actually creating a ripple effect to the bigger world and helping eliminate violence and helping create compassion and love. So I really wanted to say thank you for being willing to do the work because it's not easy. A lot of times it's not easy, but it's better than the alternative, right? The self-hatred or the self-violence or allowing abuse or being abusive in any way. So thank you for your willingness and for being here. So today we're going to set the foundation for working on emotions. Um, we need to understand. So we need to bring our bodies on board, our nervous systems, and our minds. Why do we do this work? What's the intellectual part of it? And and then to understand like what our training has been in the past and why we often stay stuck in emotions. So Um, but first of all, in any teaching situation, that is to say, when you learn a new skill, creating a sense of safety for yourself is important, especially for your own emotions. So we just did the one looking around the room exercise. The next thing, I want to teach y'all about resourcing. And Gerard, are you familiar with resourcing?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So it's a way for us to bring in a sense of security and support through our external environment, no matter who's there. So, what that could look like is imagining somebody that we love and adore, who we feel safe around, who we feel supported by, imagining them and imagining their presence being here. The cool thing about our brains, and the troubling thing, is that it often believes whatever we're imagining. So, in this case, we're just going to use that. We're going to imagine that person, or maybe it's a place. For me, the redwoods is a place that feels like the most supportive and loving and wonderful. And so I would imagine myself sitting in the redwoods as a resource, as a way to mentally and emotionally support myself through difficult work. So, what is, and also that could be an object, maybe a crystal, maybe a shrine. So, Gerard, for you, what is a resource that that you could use throughout our class today if you feel overwhelmed?
Hmm. I'm inspired by your mentioning of the redwoods, so I'm trying to think of a place that I've been where I've felt very comfortable
Mm.
outdoors.
Hmm.
But I'm also thinking of the voice of a teacher who I
Mm.
listen to frequently, Ram Dass,
Yeah,
very
okay.
famous guy whose voice is at once soothing and hilarious.
Uh-huh.
So
Great.
I'm just going to go with that. That's my
Okay.
that's my resourcing right now.
Love it. And for those of you watching, one resource a lot of people has is their pets. So if you have a dog that you adore or a cat you adore, pets are such wonderful support animals, usually. Some cats are jerks, but but a pet is a really great resource. So either having the pet there in the room with you or imagining your pet there can be really helpful. So anytime you're feeling overwhelmed or upset or a little frustrated, um, bring in that resource with your imagination or touch it.
That's a
Yeah.
good idea. I just brought Lola in.
Yay! Hi, Lola. Aw, wonderful. So let's talk about human emotions and dispel the myth that they're bad. Most of us were trained on in some way that our emotions are bad, that they're unacceptable, that we have to control them, that we have to not feel them. And and it's kind of like saying a tree shouldn't have branches and leaves. What? A tree has branches and leaves or it will die. And the same with humans is like we have our body, without our body we're going to die. Our brains, our emotions, our nervous systems. So when you reject a part of yourself, it's a kind of death. And it might even feel that way. Like feeling depressed or dissociated or withdrawn, shut down. A lot of those are symptoms of rejecting your own emotions and that part of your humanity. So, and of course, like a lot of our caretakers, our parents, our grandparents, and others have not had the tools to support us with our emotions. And so for me as a kid, I was super sensitive. I acted out a lot. That is to say, like, I would express anger and frustration and whatnot. And my parents would shut it down because they didn't know what to do with it. And they thought they had to put it under control. And so for you, Gerard, did you have an experience of that where your emotions were shut down or you
Yeah.
were made to feel wrong?
Um, yeah, and I noticed that in the homework that I did ahead of this. I hadn't thought about that in some time, um, but expressing sadness, especially,
Mm,
um, the instructions from my family were, don't feel that way.
Don't feel that way. Yep. Yeah. It's like saying don't have a hand. It's 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 ridiculous and yet it's so common, right? So so our human emotions are an integral part of who we are and and we need to welcome those back in. Um, and there's a difference between feeling emotions and acting out emotions. Totally different. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I want to introduce the concept of your three informational centers. And Jared, I think you and I have gone over this before, but we have our brains, which are wonderful in that we can think about things in the future, we can imagine things, we can create language and give meaning to what we experience. And then we have our bodies, and it's such a rich experience of physical sensation and symptoms. And we have our emotions. All of these three information centers are important. And when we can work with them together, imagine like bringing all three to your council table. So that is to say, you're paying attention to your body and your body symptoms and your sensations. You're paying attention to your emotions because they're there to tell you that either your needs are being met or they are not being met. And you're paying attention to your brain. That's to try and give meaning to everything and to decide what to do about it. So, all three need to be at your council table to make the best decisions for yourself. When you're rejecting your emotions, any of them, when you've decided they're bad, you've basically excluded them from the council table and they don't get to share with you their information. And so it's hard for you to make the best choice for yourself. Does that make sense?
It does.
Cool. Okay. The other thing is, this helps you have boundaries. And boundaries are the thing that helps you see where you end and another person begins. It's critical to have compassion and empathy for yourself and for others to have boundaries. To know, like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm needing. Oh, I wonder, are you feeling this? Are you needing this? And so we can separate that, and it creates a lot more spaciousness for empathy. So, our emotions will tell us what we're needing, and well, they'll tell us when a need is being met or not met, and help us get closer to discovering the things that we want and don't want. Huge part of boundaries is knowing, like, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. This works for me, this produces the results I want, this feels healthy to me, this does not. When you're rejecting your emotions, you are rejecting the very messengers who are there to indicate to you whether or not you are following your boundaries, whether or not you are in the direction of what supports you versus in the direction of what is destructive to you in some way. Does that make sense?
Say it again one more time.
Yeah. So if you're rejecting your emotions, you are ignoring the messengers that can help you decipher what's good for you and what's not good for you. That is to say, what's supportive for you in your life versus what's destructive. Does that make sense?
Okay, that's clear. Thank you for repeating that.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for asking. So we want to welcome them all. In the workbook, I asked you to write down what emotions you reject yourself for, also what emotions you were rejected for as a child. And those emotions are the ones that, like, they actually do have critical information for you. And so those especially are the ones that I want to support you in bringing back to your council table. So, once again, there is a difference between feeling an emotion and acting out something based on an emotion. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm feeling frustration and I notice it in my body. For me, frustration feels like kind of a little bit of pressure in my head. It feels like a tightening a little bit in my chest. And um, that's emotion in and of itself is harmless. It is it is just information. However, if I yell at my partner because I'm feeling frustrated, and let's say they did something that inspired my frustration, and I blamed them and yelled at them, that is a strategy I'm using to try and get whatever need met that this emotion of frustration is alerting me to. The emotion itself is benign. It does not make you do anything. The action that you do as a result of feeling this emotion, that action is what can create um, pain for others, disconnection, isolation, or whatever those things might be. So that action could um, deprive you of other needs you have, like connection, or it could bring you closer, depending on what you choose. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So if you are rejecting your emotions, if you're deciding like I don't want to feel that, it's really hard to decide on a supportive action that as a response to the emotion. So let's say with the example of the frustration, I'm frustrated. I hate feeling frustrated. I have an experience of being rejected when I feel frustrated. So I want to suppress that. I want to like not feel it, but I can't help it because it's there. And so I act out on it. Maybe again, I yell at my partner, and now two things are happening. I'm both acting out in this way that doesn't meet my values, and I'm feeling ashamed. Or yeah, I think that ashamed is mostly it. So now I have less clarity on what I'm actually needing. On the other hand, if I'm willing to invite frustration to the council table, feel it in my body. Again, for me, it's a pressure in my head. It's a tightness in my chest. It can be other sensations. So I'm like welcoming it in, giving it space, allowing it to be there, and just breathing into it, letting it be. Then I can find out, okay, what am I needing that's not being met? That this emotion of frustration is alerting me to. And I think, Gerard, you and I have done some of that work. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And was it helpful when you were able to really invite in that emotion for yourself?
Yes, it feels risky
Risky.
sometimes. So it feels like that risk that I can take. Um, and the information that I get from it is very valuable
Yeah.
from doing that. One of my, what you brought up in me was, what am I looking for? What am I trying to get with that
Mm-hmm.
emotion? What is it? What is my need that is not being met with that
What
emotion?
is your need? Yes. Yeah. And like an emotion of frustration can help you see what's not being met. Other emotions like joy, pleasure, um, connection, excitement, inspiration, they're alerting you that needs are being met. But either way, if you're rejecting the emotions, they can't give you their information. so so yeah, like when you were able to feel your emotion and welcome it, you're able to get that to understand your needs better. So so let's say you make that space in your body. You welcome in the sensation. Here's what's going to happen. The raw emotion itself is going to like expand and then pass. And then it might build and get a little bigger and a little bigger, and then it passes. And it might do this a few times. It's like the waves of the ocean, like a slow pulse. Emotions never stay stuck unless you reject them, unless you shame yourself for having the emotion. If you try to talk yourself out of the emotion or suppress it, then it stays stuck. If you feel the raw emotion, its nature is to move, to flow. Emotion, it's like energy in motion. So it comes, it tells you what's going on, it tells you what you need, it leaves. So when you make that space for the emotion, then and only then can you um, find out what your needs are. But again, it's only after you feel it because then you can really access the information. So, Gerard, what is a time where you felt a big emotion and you were able to let it in and find the needs?
Mm. It's always challenging for me, Adana, to identify something um, in the past.
Mm.
I think I think the two most familiar emotions that I learn from, let's say,
Hmm.
are anger and fear.
Okay. Hmm. So let's use anger then. What is a time that you felt anger and allowed it in? Have you had that experience before? Like
Mm,
made space for it?
it's really frightening to do that. I'm always afraid of. I don't want. How do I put it? It's the concern
Hmm.
that my anger is going to hurt someone.
Ah, okay, cool. Let's pause there for a moment because this is a valid concern that so many of us have for why we will not feel strong emotions like anger. So let us differentiate feeling an emotion and acting out on that emotion. If you are just feeling the emotion, is it going to harm anybody?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, okay. So what is it that actually creates harm for others?
An emotion boiling over into violent action, whether that's language
Violent action.
or physical violent action.
Yeah, violent action, either language or physical, or even like if you decide, I can't handle this, I'm leaving, and you walk away or slam the door in somebody's face, that's still an action. So I love that you bring this up. It is the action that can create harm or support. The emotion itself does not do that. And I love also that you point out when it boils over, then the action is what creates harm. Why does it boil over? What happens so that it gets to the point that it boils over?
That I'm resisting it.
You're
I think
resisting it.
I thought
Exactly.
I did think of an idea. I think of a time. So I had one of my partners that I work with, I had an expectation,
Mm,
um, and that expectation was not met, and
mm-hmm,
and so I was angry about somebody not living up to what they said they were going to do,
mm-hmm.
um, abandoning their post,
Yeah,
from my perspective.
sure.
Um, and I think it would have been really easy for me to say some things that would have very much damaged the future
Mm,
relationship, right? Or the
yeah.
relationship going forward. And so I recognized and felt that anger, and what do you know? It passed. I
Mm,
so I thought of that person and I thought, well, what would I have done in that person's situation? And understand that they were in a difficult spot.
mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So since you were able to allow yourself to feel the emotion, it passed because emotions do that, and you were able to come to understanding of the other person's actions, or at least closer understanding. Yeah, okay. What need did that anger alert you to?
Um, Need for consistency, I think.
Uh-huh. Consistency?
Need for fulfillment of a contract, I guess. Fulfillment of a working contract.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So it sounds like reliability.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a form of security. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. So security, I guess.
Security.
Security, I guess, is the base need in
Mm.
that regard.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So your anger alerted you that your need for security was not being met in this situation with your partner, with your business partner. Yeah, cool. So from there, were you able to find a strategy, a different strategy, and try it to get your need for security met?
Hmm. In ensuing situations, um,
Or that one, either one.
I think in that one it was a recognition of that person definitely recognized that there was a problem.
Ah, okay. So recognize that the relationship and um, the agreements that y'all had together wasn't really working.
In that situation, that
Yeah.
person realized that it was without me vibing or saying anything.
Mhm.
That person realized that um, there was a letdown or
Mm,
a lapse in responsibility, um,
hmm.
perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. Do you imagine you would have come to understand what you need to do with that if you had ignored your anger or blown up on this person?
No, I would have simply, if I had blown up, it would have simply have been me um, pushing my expectations onto that person, and the blame game. I would have
The
been
blame
playing
game.
the blame game. I guess
Yep.
is where I would have gone. I would have spent some time there, and
Yeah.
I've already spent too much time there, um,
Yeah.
and it's not productive. I think the other
Yes.
part of the question, Dinah, was what was the other part of the question?
That was it. Yeah.
Okay.
Was were if you had not felt your anger, would you have been able to come to an understanding of what needed to happen in that situation with your business partner?
Unlikely.
Unlikely. Yeah. Okay, so this actually transitions us beautifully into the next lesson, which is our mental model of the world. In So the two models that I see when we're talking about working with emotions and relationships and self-talk is the model of rightness and wrongness, goodness and badness. And that is the one that we live in. Our language portrays and um, builds that model of right and wrong, good and bad. Our very, like, myths about a god and a devil, and um, if you do something bad, you deserve punishment. Like, that's in our mythos. And it's in our language. So growing up, if I did something that my parents or caretakers didn't like, I was often slapped and said, bad girl. They said, bad girl. And it attached this wrongness to me, who I am as a person. So Brene Brown's definition of shame is thinking you are bad because of something you did, versus guilt, which is recognizing what you did and that it didn't work. It didn't have the result you wanted. So who we are really doesn't change. What we do is very fluid. It's easy to change unless we attach what we do with who we are. Then it's linked. And that's where I think that's where the language like, I am bad, I am unworthy, I am um, unreliable, I am even like, I am a good person. That's the same thing, just the flip side of the coin. That's like the pride. I am, I've done a good thing, so I am a good person. And the trap is, okay, well, if I did something that hurt, I am a bad person. So it's the same trap. So that model of right and wrong feeds shame, blame, judgment, and rejection. So let me give you another model. That is a no fault model. And a lot of you are probably going to be like, what? No fault? How can that be? If this person kills another person, they're bad. No questions asked, right?
Yes,
However,
indeed.
if that is the model we live by, it is impossible to get away from, I am bad, I am unlovable, I am unworthy, I am not good enough, because that is the model we're living in. Now, the action of killing another person, I do not condone at all. So let's be clear on that. However, we need to separate the action from the person, because otherwise we just reject the person and try and shove them away or kill them so they stop killing, and it perpetuates violence in our world. This model of right and wrong, the model we have in our heads, perpetuates violence in our own selves, in our families, and in our community and the world. So instead, this no fault model is a model of feelings and needs and strategies. The feelings, like we talked about earlier, are benign. They are just information. That's it, just information. The needs are universal. All humans have a need for connection. All humans have a need for love. All humans have a need for shelter and food and safety and belonging. All humans have a need to be seen and heard, to express ourselves. Our needs are universal. That so in this model, we can see ourselves as equals, and then recognize that the strategy we're using to try to get our needs met may cause harm or may create life. Is that making sense, Gerard?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So, what is an example? Would it be okay to share an example and break it down into like feelings, needs, and strategies with you?
Sure. I'll try.
Okay, cool. Do you want to use a different example than the one you shared previously, or the same?
Sure, I'll use a different example. It may take a minute to come up
Sure.
with it. Um, what is the prompt then? A time when an emotion, when I felt an emotion, when I accepted an emotion.
Yeah, let's just think of a time. Um, let's think of a time when you felt hurt by somebody else's actions.
Oh, okay. Wow, this goes way back. Um,
Okay. Would you share that story with us?
yeah, I guess it was by somebody's actions or inactions.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why this one comes up, and I'm not even sure I can. It's one of those emotions that I mean, it's vividly still with me, and
Mm,
strangely, I was where it was a period of loneliness. I was
mm,
a teenager, and maybe I didn't have as close of friends as I wanted to, and I think I recalled I was waiting for somebody to come over and pick me up, but I don't know if it was in my head that my friend was going to arrive.
mm,
I was waiting on my street, on the street where I lived, looking down the street, waiting for their car to arrive.
mhm,
And I remember that it was a habit. Now that I think about it, I'm going to wait for this long. I'm going to wait for this. I'm going to wait for this many cars to pass. This
mm,
was an era before instant communication was
mhm.
available. Um, and
So,
I recalled that eventually that person passed, but they were in their car with another friend of mine, and they didn't stop for me. And
oh
so
no.
so I felt very hurt and rejected
Yeah.
by that. So
Okay. So let's look at that story through the lens of rightness and wrongness.
okay, yes,
So tell me the story in that lens,
rightness and wrongness
that mental model.
in that mental model that my person who I was a friend of, that person wasn't, it didn't see me as good of a friend
Mm,
as someone else, and they didn't want to spend time with me. They would instead wanted to do something with their other friend,
mm-hmm,
and so they chose someone else over me. Um,
mm. Yeah.
and I was rejected, and so they rejected me. They said, "You are not good enough." This is of course, in my head. You're not
Right.
good enough. You're not as important to me as this other friend. Um,
Yeah.
I'm rejecting you.
Yeah. So that model, looking at it in that lens of right and wrong, um, created these. With that, you created these stories of rejection,
Yes.
right? Yeah, and maybe shame, like, oh, I'm not as good as this other person, this other friend,
Yes, and I shouldn't have had this assumption and waited. So I was beating myself up about it. Why should
beating
I?
yourself up.
Yeah, why should I think that person wanted to come spend time with me, etc.
Yeah, yeah. And that rightness and wrongness model that's a punishment reward model also, right? So where you did something wrong, you deserve punishment. You beat yourself up mentally.
Mm,
And
mm.
and like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have expected whatever. But it's this self-punishment, right?
I'm only seeing that when you pointed out that yes, I
Mm,
I saw that I needed to be punished for um, um, having that expectation, or for
mm,
not being in my mind good enough. But I also in the right and wrong scenario, I also saw that person as wrong, and I thought they should be
yeah.
punished by
Ah,
me withdrawing my friendship from
yeah.
them. So
Yeah. So
that
then they're bad, they're
vindictiveness.
wrong.
I'm
They
gonna
get
lash. I'm gonna lash back. This is the story. This is what happened. I'm gonna lash back and fight back and hurt them. Hurt that other. If I can, I'm going to hurt that other person.
Yep, totally. Beautiful job of describing that in this rightness wrongness model, this good bad punishment reward model. Yeah,
It's apparently all too familiar
right.
if I think about it.
So familiar, right? Like all of our movies are portrayed in that, in our like the wars. We justify these wars in our world because we create an image of that person or that country or that species or whatever being bad and wrong and deserving punishment. And therefore it creates this space to justify violence to them. And there's no way to escape the self-violence that happens in that same model. Absolutely no way to escape it. And when I think about this, I feel such grief, just huge loss of what could be in our world, which is connection and harmony and cooperation. And this is what we're trying to get to now. And this is why I'm so glad you're doing the work, that you're willing to go there. Yeah, we're shifting fundamentally the way we think about the world. Now, let's take that same story and view it through the lens, the model of feelings and needs. And let's start with you.
Hmm.
What were you feeling? First of all, what were you feeling when you anticipated your friend picking you up?
Ah, excellent. I was feeling excitement and joy
Yeah,
and anticipation
yeah,
of fun happening, and
yeah,
that's what I was feeling, and of connection.
of
That's
connection.
what I was feeling. I was feeling a sense of connection and making a connection
Yeah,
with with a friend.
yeah. Okay. So, what needs of yours were being met with this thing that you thought was going to happen?
That the need to connect, the need to
Hmm.
feel a part of something greater than just myself,
To
um,
belong?
and to belong,
Hmm.
and the need for joy and companionship.
Uh-huh.
Normal things like that.
Yeah, it sounds like the need for fun, for
Yeah.
adventure.
Yes.
Yeah,
Discovery, and sharing that discovery with a friend.
yeah. Awesome. So, is there anything right or wrong with those feelings and needs?
There's nothing right or wrong.
Yeah, they're just feelings and just needs, right? Totally universal for the human experience. Okay, now, when your friend passed you by in the car, what were your feelings then?
Um, Sadness and anger. I was
Sadness and anger.
I was
Yeah.
sad followed by anger.
So pause right there. The reason I want to pause you is that I want to eliminate first, for now, any stories about why, like any justification for why you were sad and angry, and create space to just feel the sadness and the anger. Wonderful. I see that you took a deep breath. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. What does that sadness and anger feel like in your body as you recall it from that memory?
It feels heavy.
Heavy. Yeah.
Feels painful. It just
Painful. Yeah. So, can you make space in your body for that heaviness and that pain without, again, without the stories trying to justify it or push it away or fix it or change it? Just make space. The heaviness, the pain, the sadness, the anger. What happens as you make space for it?
its power diminishes. It passes.
Interesting. It passes. Interesting.
It
Yeah.
it
And
loosens.
mhm. And As you imagine yourself as that young Gerard feeling anger and sadness, is there anything wrong with him for that? Or right?
It's a perfectly normal response.
Yeah, perfectly normal response. Of course. Of course he felt sad and angry. He had expected this experience that would have met his needs for belonging and fun, adventure, sharing, connection, and then saw it pass by. So, what were his needs? What were your needs then that were not being met that this sadness and anger alerted you to?
Um, I think that consistency from a friend, honesty,
Consistency,
um, honesty,
honesty, uh-huh.
and that need for connection that was not being met.
Yeah, connection. It sounds like some clarity, that honesty, clarity. Is that
Clarity. Yeah.
similar?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perhaps understanding, like understanding
Understanding.
why
Yeah.
they
Yes. Okay.
passed.
Yeah. Yeah. That was missing. Yeah.
Okay, so you're feeling sad and angry because your need for connection, consistency, clarity, and honesty and understanding was not met. Okay, is there anything wrong or right about that? Is there anybody to blame for those feelings and needs?
Um, I can blame myself for having those expectations, which of course I did and
Interesting.
do,
Yep.
and beat myself up for it.
Ah, okay, so we can return to that model of rightness and wrongness, punishment, reward. Yeah.
But
So
there's inherently nothing wrong. There's
yeah, yeah. You're a human with needs and feelings and had this experience that inspired those feelings because your needs were not met. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Okay, now, now let's look at the strategy to get those needs met. What is it that at the time you did as a result of this experience?
I withdrew.
You withdrew. Okay, yeah. So your strategy to get your needs met for connection, consistency, clarity, understanding. Your strategy was withdrawing. Did it work? Did it help you meet those needs?
No, it did not.
No. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So let's pause there because it's really easy to jump right back into the model of right and wrong when a strategy doesn't work, right?
Yes.
So we can jump back into blaming ourselves or others because the strategy didn't work. And I laugh at this because it's so ridiculous, but it's what we all do, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of like um, if you are if you're trying to learn any new skill, you have to like try and try and try and often you're going to fail more than you won't. Think of a baby starting to crawl, right? They're just like scooting along and they're just really trying and their little limbs are just like not really moving. And we don't say like, you're doing it wrong, baby. No. Or when they start to walk and they're just like, flop, fall. And they're just failing day after day after day. We don't look at them and go like, oh, you're a huge failure. You're never going to walk. No, it's ridiculous. We don't think like, oh, they should be ashamed. They're so, oh, I'm to blame because my child isn't walking. No, we understand that child needs to walk and it's going to learn how by trial and error. So, same with your strategy. When you try a strategy that doesn't work, if you can refrain from self-blame or other blame and shame, then we can think about that strategy and create a new one. So, what is a strategy you could have used? Or let's say if you were in that same scenario now, understanding
Mm.
your feelings and needs, what is a strategy you could imagine that might get your needs met better?
Um, Expressing empathy for
Okay.
whatever that person did or did not do. Um,
Okay.
to understand that people are um, people. They're not perfect. They're not robots.
Yeah, people are not perfect.
And
Yeah,
miscommunication happens. Um,
right. So I'm curious, might you ask your friend a clarifying question to gain some understanding?
that would be really risky, and
Ooh.
really. So I think the fear is I'm going to lose face.
Uh-huh.
That that I will put myself in a position to be ridiculed.
Yeah, so it's vulnerable.
Yeah, vulnerability, very much so.
Yes.
I To say I care about this friendship.
Yeah.
I care about this friendship, and I care about this friendship,
Yeah.
and for that other person, you're always risking
Yep.
that ridicule, I guess, or something of that sort. So,
In the right and wrong model, yes, absolutely. And here's how. Either they, living in that right and wrong model, ridicule you. They assign a badness to you because of that question or because of your action, or you assign a badness to yourself because of your question.
or
Let's
both,
imagine, huh?
or both.
Yes. So let's imagine instead that we're living in this model of no fault, of feelings and needs.
Mm.
How might, well, I would like to play the role of them. So let's say you're asking the clarifying question, what would you say? And I'm going to be them in the no fault model.
No fault. Oh, this is a tough one. This hard communication. Hey, I was looking forward to connecting with you um, the other day, and going out and having fun, and it didn't happen. But our friendship's important to me, and let's go find something to do together. I don't
Okay?
know,
Love it.
but I forgot the important part. That hurt. I that
Yeah.
actually hurt. That actually hurt me. I had this expectation, and that we were going to connect, and we didn't, and that hurt my
Hmm.
feelings.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds to me like you really wanted to hang out and have some fun. And when I didn't pick you up, you felt hurt. You felt disappointed. You felt pain because you care about our relationship.
That's true.
Totally. Okay.
Thanks for realizing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I care about our relationship too. May I share what happened on my end?
Yeah, please. I'm curious.
Cool. I had no idea I was supposed to pick you up. I'm so sorry. So I didn't even think to look for you there. In the future, or I would like for us to come up with a way that we can um, make sure we have more clear expectations. Is that all right? Can we do that?
Yeah, let's invent cell phones. That would it'll be easier.
Love it.
Um,
Yeah. So So the point there is like in that model of no fault, it's so much easier to think of strategies that might work, right? Because we're not like rejecting ourselves or the other person. We're not putting ourselves in shame. And when we're in shame, we actually can't think clearly. Our prefrontal cortex actually goes offline and we go into the amygdala. So
mm,
we're in fight or flight when
mm.
we're in shame. And shame and blame are similar. They're just like, I mean, the right wrong model is similar. So in this no fault model, we can stay in that part of our nervous system that is the um, rest and connect. And from there, we think so much more clearly and we can practice having better strategies for our relationship.
Hmm.
Yeah. How does that land for you?
That offers some clarity. Um,
Mm,
it's just
cool.
but what's amazing is that I I'm thinking back to that random experience when I was 15 years old, and I held on to that feeling,
Yeah.
and that it's amazing that I held on to that feeling,
Yeah.
and there's a few more where those came from.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
just
we
amazing
don't
that I
have
held
time to
on.
go into any of those anymore today, but that you're
Okay.
noticing, yeah, that you're noticing that you held on to that feeling from when you were 15. Isn't that interesting? Because again, when you reject yourself or others because of your feelings, instead of allowing their information of the needs and then trying to do something about those needs, that's when it gets stuck. And that's where we can create these non-supportive habits in our relationships that never meets our needs. So practicing this model, this no fault model, the model of feelings and needs, and being willing to go through that to feel your feelings, recognize your needs, and then think of strategies and be vulnerable in trying to and inviting your person to understand your feelings and help you meet your needs while meeting theirs. Because that's the other part, and we'll go into that in another class, is is starting to really understand other people's feelings and needs. Yeah.
No, the no fault model. I like this. Okay.
Yeah, the no
Thank you.
fault model. So this this work is a combination of Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and Dr. Catherine Close somatic dialogue. It's that combining in our bodies, like embodying this model. So the model was created many years ago by Marshall Rosenberg. The embodiment practice is Catherine. And so my work here is bringing those together to apply them. In our next class, we're going to go over getting really familiar with the language of feelings and needs. So we'll bring in the list that Marshall Rosenberg created, feelings when your needs are met, feelings when your needs are not met, and universal human needs, basic needs. In the meantime, I'll send out those lists, and you can read Brene Brown's newest book, Atlas of the Heart, where she helps break down a lot of the feelings and what they're like and how they are often expressed and how to have empathy for them. So her book is a great resource. We'll get really familiar next time and take more scenarios and break them down and find the feelings and needs for you and for the other party in that story, so that we can really hone in this model. And then in a couple of other classes, we'll do more of the somatic dialogue, which is where we can practice embodiment, practice the really feeling in our body. Um, and then in another class, we'll go over shame and pride versus grief and praise and how those play out in our lives. So thank you so much for attending. For those who are watching, you can go to adinabarlow.com and find other resources there, other things you can plug into. Gerard, it was wonderful having you here. And thank you so much for sharing vulnerably and honestly your experiences and for allowing us the opportunity to learn from your stories. Thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
for doing your work.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.